The Canadian Turf Stakes is a Grade 3. It's the 12th race on Gulfstream's Saturday card. It's running a mile and a 16th on the turf for 4-year-olds and up. And I think this is a really pretty good betting race. If we take a look at the field, you'll see some repeat performers we've seen before. Of course, Atone is always ubiquitous. He seems to show up on the turf at Gulfstream and stakes races. We've got Ice Chocolat, Emmanuel, Smoke and Tea, probably the most notable entrants here. And then Giant Game, who's trying the turf for the first time and can't, not surprised by that, being by Giant's Causeway. And so we'll take a look and we'll go through them one at a time here. And as you know, just a refresher, we break them down by running style. So we'll start with Giant Game. He's first on turf. That's not a worry to me, being by Giant's Causeway. I don't think that's going to be a problem. He's a big horse with a big stride, and I think he'll be fine. The key to a good race for Giant Game is if he can settle and set reasonable fractions on the front end. Now, he is the lone confirmed front runner, I think. One that absolutely has to have the lead, is what I mean. So he has a chance in that regard. The problem is, to me, Saratoga Flash, whose form is not very good recently, is probably going to get sent. And that, in turn, disturbs the chance of having it just, being Giant Game being able to get out to the lead, settle in, and set the reasonable fractions that will help him win this race. So that's my biggest concern. The other thing is the outside post. It's going to be hard for him to get to that position that he wants, especially with Saratoga Flash there. You're also going to get constant pressure from Smoke and Tea and Emmanuel. And I like this horse, and Dale Roman's a good man. I met him up at Saratoga. He's a good guy. But I think there's some very limited prospects here, given what he's going to be facing. And if he can get to the lead and get it on his own by himself, he's got a chance. But I don't see that as likely here. So sadly, I'm going to let him go. Saratoga Flash is all form, albeit on all weather for the last couple. But it's hard to really get excited about him, especially since he's jumping up into graded stakes company. So I think he'll be a pace factor, but that's the extent of his participation, and I'll toss him. Smoke and Tea is ultra consistent, and he does fire well fresh. Then I think that's significant since he hasn't run since the win in the River City, so it's been a while. His running style rating off the pace is a perfect fit here, I think, for Gulfstream, although he is 0 for 3. But I think he's got the kind of field where I think he'll be very effective here, and he's certainly a prime win candidate for sure. Emmanuel has demonstrated consistently that he is not a Grade 1 horse, but this is a Grade 3. The pace scenario works here, and since he, too, will be up near the pace, he should find a good spot. He won the Tampa Stakes last year off a similarly long layoff, so I don't think that's an issue either, and I'll expect a good effort out of him. Emmanuel's certainly one you have to think about. I think he's not going to be quite as close as Smoke and Tea, so Smoke and Tea may have the jump on him tactically, but I think Emmanuel certainly is a factor here. Turf King is he's one that's hard to know what to do with. He's got that feel of the other Chad Brown, if you know what I mean. A lot of times, particularly up north, Chad Brown has 2 or 3 horses on the turf in every race, and a lot of times it's the one you don't expect that ends up winning or doing the best. And that's kind of the way I feel with Turf King. He hasn't run since July, and where he did win in the Marine Stakes on all weather, but that was at 3. And certainly a lot could have happened since then, and certainly I think Chad Brown's showing quite a bit of confidence putting him into a graded stakes when he hasn't run since July. So I think Turf King is kind of sneaky here. I think underneath is a certainty. But if you get the right price, he might be one you want to think about toying with on top. Just for the reasons stated. I just think we've seen the scenario before where it's the one that you don't expect from Chad Brown that wins. Siege of Boston is the MO for slow, steady improvement, because that's what he's done. Every race he's been getting progressively better, and he was probably too far back off the bench in the Tampa Bay, but he did close well against what is usually a speed favoring track. And the only problem with Siege of Boston is he seems to leave himself a little too much to do. But I do like this horse, and I think if you're going to have one to upset the apple cart, he might just might be it, particularly if there's some entanglement in the pace up front. And I think that might be possible, because I kind of feeling Saratoga Flash, they're just going to send him. And if that's the case, then he's got some pace to run to. And of the late runners, I really like Siege of Boston. So I think you'll get a price too. Atone, he always seems to end up in stakes races on the turf at Gulfstream. And he ran a big race in the Pegasus off the bench. It was better than perhaps it looked on paper, but he didn't follow it up with much last year. And I mean, he won last year, but then he really didn't do much for the rest of the year. And that was off the bench. And now he's 7 years old, and I'm kind of thinking the same thing is going to happen here. Meaning he ran a pretty good race in the Pegasus World Cup, but I don't expect him to follow up. I just think Father Time is probably going to really creeping up on him now, so I'm going to let him go. Eldon's Prince, I just don't think is good enough. And Napoleonic War, pretty much the same thing. I think he's plateaued, and his plateau isn't good enough here, so I'm letting him go as well. We've talked about Giant Game. Ice Chuck a lot is an interesting horse. The thing is, he runs more at sprints and sprinter miler type, and now he's got that extra half panel, and I kind of have a feeling that's going to hinder his chances to be effective here. Although it is really hard to knock a horse who's been in the money 15 out of 22 times, but I just have a feeling underneath is probably more likely, and hopefully you'll get some decent value to use him. So if we look at our wagering strategy, I'm going to try to upset the apple cart a little bit here. I got a feeling the pace is going to be maybe a little quicker than expected, and if it is, I think Siege of Boston is a horse to really consider strongly. I think you're going to get a price in this race, and particularly when you think Smokin' Tea and Emmanuel have very similar styles, and they're both going to be short prices. And both, I think, have a claim to run a good race. I'm looking for somebody who can benefit from maybe if they tangle in the stretch. And I think it's Siege of Boston. So what I'm going to do is we're going to box in an exact 2, 3, and 5. And then we're going to key box the 5 with 2, 3. And then we'll throw Turf King in there as kind of a wild card to maybe add some value. So if we get Siege of Boston on top, we double up with a nice price, even if we get Smokin' Tea or Emmanuel underneath. And then we're going to go trifecta. We're just going to be real simple, put 5 on top with 2, 3, 4, and 10, and hope for the best. I think we could go crazy with a lot of different combinations, but I want to take a stand with a horse at a price, particularly in this race where I can't, in all honesty, it's hard to find one to really, from the more prominent horses, that I can separate. So if I can't do that, then I want to find some value. You want to use Turf King at a price, I wouldn't blame you at all, because this race kind of has that upset feel to it. So for me, I'm going with Siege of Boston, and we'll keep our fingers crossed and hope for the best.